a long time, man, a full 30 days out of the studio. And we are coming back with an absolute banger of a guest. And you guys know that I have been looking to talk to completely different people than what we started this podcast with. But the main purpose is to talk to individuals who have done incredible things, changed their lives by being proactive, by showing up for themselves, changing their mindset. And my guest today, Aaron Lohman, is definitely the definition of that. Thank you so much for being here, man.
I'm honored.
Dude, dude, you got a journey. You have got a journey. For those of you who don't know you, you were a police officer part time. You have this Instagram called Huge Fat Loser. You lost 175 pounds. You're a fitness and mindset coach. You work on
Mhm.
accountability, and you talk really seriously about childhood trauma, PTSD, moving through things, how you got to where you really just weren't happy with your life, and you said, "No more. We're not doing this. I'm changing my life. I'm getting healthy and I'm going to lean in." So let's talk about all things. Number one, are from Long Island. So this accent is going to be incredible.
Yes, Long Island.
Incredible. Dude, how did you what brought you to wanting to be a police officer? At what point did you go, yeah, that's the job for me?
I'm gonna be honest, and I tell people this all the time. For most cops, it's their lifelong dream. They want to be a cop. Their dad was a cop. Their mom was a cop. Whatever. For me, it wasn't that. I failed out of 5 colleges, and I was a landscaper. And a guy who I worked with as a landscaper was like, "Hey, listen, the NYPD is hiring." At the time, they were paying $25,000 a year, and I was like, I don't know." So I applied, and I got in. Pretty much, my mother gave me an ultimatum, like find a real job or you're on your own type thing. And I found the real job. All right, I found the job of being a cop, but I've loved it. As somebody, especially who was really skeptical about doing it at first, very anti-authority growing up. I loved it.
Well, let's bring it back even further. Let's talk about your childhood and what that was like, because your book is one I do recommend people go and grab. Starting over is something that I believe will not only help people resonate with your story, but they will see a
Mhm.
lot of themselves in that. And you go really far back, you talk really deeply. So please tell everyone a little bit about your childhood and how you got to literally being over 175 pounds overweight.
So when I was 7, my father, my parents got divorced, and then we saw each other for a year, and then out of nowhere, he called me up. He was like, "Listen, I don't want to see you anymore." It was the most bizarre thing ever. I could still like seriously hear those words on the end of the phone, and I was like, "Okay." And then I hung up the phone, and then after that, my mother dated a bunch of people who abused us, and it sucked. And you know, looking back on it, it's so funny when you go through something traumatic and you go through something abusive, you don't almost realize how bad it was until you tell somebody else who hasn't been through that, and they're like, "Oh my god, yeah, that's bad." Like
Yeah.
me and my brother will talk about it, and my wife will just look at me like, "Wow, that's crazy." But so I never dealt with trauma or abuse in a positive way. It started out with just trying to isolate myself, and I got really depressed, and I would combat that depression and anxiety by eating. And then I was very extremely overweight even back then when I was going through what I was going through. But my family was overweight too. So I just thought it was 100% normal, that my behavior was 100% normal. And then I decided when the whole police department thing came around, I lost weight, but then I gained it back because I never really dealt with my trauma, and I was still using the same exact coping mechanisms that I was using before. Because you don't when you go through trauma, you don't you think that, like, if you're not thinking about it in that moment, that you're totally good, you're healed, I'm fine, and then you move on and something else happens, and then it repiles on that previous trauma on top of the new trauma, and then that coping mechanism just starts over again.
Mhm. And yours was eating. I mean, that comfort eating, that idea that food was always there. I mean, having your father say those things to you, I hope to God I never have to hear anybody say that to a child. So I can only imagine the damage it did, the self-love, the self-worth. Am I worth it? Why does he want to be around me? But food is always there. Food's always there. That's why I
Yeah.
feel like you see this mass outside of the, let's not go down the rabbit hole, but outside of the way that America treats their food and how they feed people. But food is seems like it is It's the tool most people use to get through trauma, to get through life, to get through all these things. It's just there. It's always there when other things aren't.
Yeah, and people really don't realize how, because it's so ingrained in our society and in our culture, that food is used to celebrate and like grieve everything. You know what I mean?
All of it.
All of it. You know, oh, we have a party. Let's go get a cake. Oh, you're depressed. Let's go have some ice cream. It's just, and it's this loop of that is the coping mechanism that you're supposed to use, but it's really not. It does so much bad damage to you.
Well, and it's I think the wild thing too is I'm not sure if you've been to Europe, but I mean, when you go to Europe, the food is so different. I mean, I could eat a loaf of bread a day with no exaggeration because I've done it.
Mhm.
And then nothing changes, nothing happens. I don't have a glucose spike. I don't have the horrible feeling in my stomach. I don't get bloated. I don't have the difficulty in breaking it down from the gut biome perspective. And then I don't have the drop in serotonin. But I eat that food even going from Canada to the United States, and trust me, we are not perfect. But even going Canada to the United States, within a week of being in America, I feel it, man. Oh my god, I feel it.
Yeah, even when I travel abroad too, I've never been to Europe. I want to go. You know, my wife doesn't really like planes that much. We'll
Okay.
travel 4 hours, 5 hours maximum flight, but I'm working on it. But even when I go out of the country and go other places, you can tell that the food is for sure different.
Yeah, and that I mean that's the sad about it is like you can go to Italy and you can go to France and these people live off of bread and cheese and pasta and they are not obese to the way that North America is. North America just seems to damage its food supply so that people become highly addicted, which then makes them sick, which then makes them seek medication. It's like this cyclical thing that happens. So, of no fault of your own, other than having childhood trauma, having adults around you that weren't able to step up in the way that they should have, you were left to your own devices to
Mhm.
buy food. So you're a big dude. And so when I said at the beginning that you lost 175 pounds, how tall are you?
I'm 6'4".
That's that's two of me.
Hey humans, I know you've all been seeing me drink HVMN's Ketone IQ lately. This is a game changer. Jet fuel in a bottle. I use Ketone IQ for everything in my life, whether it's running, cycling, podcasting, or just the extra boost that my brain needs. I won't lie, it helps push me to the next level in all things. I love Ketone IQ and what HVMN stands for. Go grab some shots today at hvmn.com and use the code BRASS20 and save.
Like that's obnoxiously tall. Like I love that when I meet people that are your height because when you say to me I lost 175 pounds, I want to be able to put that into perspective for people because if somebody like me is like, oh, I lost 100 pounds, I'm like, okay, well, you don't exist. So we want to be cognizant of that so people aren't like, oh, well, that's a lot of weight, but how big is the guy? So
Mhm.
just trying to prevent questions at the end of this. I know how that'll happen. So let's talk about at what point in your life did you decide like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore, I don't want to be like this, and how did you come to that conclusion?
Like anybody usually does, when you're at your breaking point, that's when you decide that, I've had enough. And that's exactly what happened. So I went from coping with food to still coping with food and then coping with work. Right. And I
Mm,
think this is something that doesn't get talked about quite enough is people think that working hard is always healthy. And it
mm,
is to a certain extent. But what I was doing was I put all my eggs into my career. I just was constantly going out there. I worked in the gang units and all this stuff, high active units, and I just put my life into this career. And then what happened was I got in trouble at work. And because my identity was just so wrapped up in work and that became my coping mechanism, now it came to a screeching halt. So now I had this trauma, I had all the trauma that happened before that, and it all piled on top of each other. And I couldn't see myself not being a cop anymore to the point where like I was going to kill myself. I was they when you get in trouble at at my job, they take your pistols from you, but you still have like your long guns and your rifles. And I had a plan to kill myself. I couldn't envision what it would be like to not be a cop anymore, to not wear a shield. Like that was my whole identity. And but I was looking in the mirror and I decided, like, listen, I don't want to die. I want to live, but I want to live differently. I want to live now, not for my career, not for anything before, but I'm going to create a whole entire version of myself that is my true and best self. And I just took one step at a time and started fixing my habits first, how I thought about things, how I viewed the world, how I viewed myself. And then I slowly started to integrate nutrition and fitness and all of that stuff because one thing leads into another. The second you start feeling better mentally and emotionally about yourself, it's like this clarity thing where where you start taking care of every aspect of your life. All these chips fall into place.
So walk me through what that looked like because I know this was a process. You've done a fantastic job in your book being really ruthlessly and brutally honest about a lot of things mindset related. So take me through that process. Walk me through point A to Z on how you were like, I'm going to get my mindset in place and allow everything else to start to fall right behind it.
I I honestly didn't know what I would do at first. The first thing I did was I started a charity for cops, and I don't do it anymore because it became too much. But I just wanted other people in my situation and in other situations to know that there was people out there that cared about them. So in doing that, I started to care more about myself. That was one of the first steps. But then,
Mm, a life of purpose. You found
yes,
purpose.
yes, one of the five pillars of resilience. Yes.
There she is.
And which I didn't know there was a now I'm like an FBI Academy certified resilience instructor, but like before I learned any of that stuff, I didn't know that what that was. I had to do all this on my own. I wish I learned this, before, and that's why I teach this to cops now, in the police department is because it's so important to find your purpose outside of work. Work could be a small part of what you do and what your purpose is, but it should not be the main focus of what your life is. Otherwise, it will eventually you're going to take that uniform off and you're going to retire. You're not going to be that anymore. So what are you going to do? You better like the way you look and what you do in the mirror. Otherwise, you're destined for failure and it's going to come crashing down really hard.
Truer words, man. Truer words. Okay. So you go purpose. We're going to start the charity. We're going to get people to care. After that, did it just snowball or did you just go like, I want to keep feeling this good? So you started seeking out other activities and other people.
So after I was done getting in trouble, I went to another another precinct, and I had a partner who I was totally shut down. I was shut out. I was just like bitter about, my career, the job, everything. So, but I met somebody. She was a fairly new cop. She was my partner. She was great. And she was so positive, had such a positive attitude and effect on me that I started to want to be like her almost and be more positive. I'm like, wait a second. I can be more positive. And then one of the biggest turning points is I actually met a guy who was in a similar situation as me, who was in my command. And he was such like a bitter, negative, miserable person that I had this moment of reflection where I thought like, "Oh my god, is that me?
Mhm.
I have to be the complete opposite of that. I can't let this be what my future is and what my life is." And then I just started slowly I started reading, I started, listening to things, I started looking up how to do cognitive behavioral therapy, start thinking things in a more positive way, start journaling. Journaling's a huge part. Being more grateful, thinking about gratitude is so big. And then it just
Mhm.
snowballed into everything else that went into my life.
So bring me through what that change was like for you, family as well, because you're now not only saying, hey, I'm going to change who I am, why I'm doing what I'm doing, but that had to have come a different feeling for your family on the other side because all of a sudden you want to make all these changes, you want to do all these different things. Was there pushback? Was it welcomed? What did that look like?
There was 0 pushback because my wife, honestly, was miserable with the way that I was acting. I used to be off duty from work, and I used to be sitting on my couch on, like, fake social media pages trying to catch criminals, doing illegal
Mm.
activities, and when my team was working, I call them and be like, "Hey, whatever," and she'd be like, "Yo, are you always gonna be like this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm always gonna be like this." It was just so foolish. I was wasting my time when I could have been spending it with them, and then not only that, I listen, people who meet me now don't understand the negative, miserable person that I was because of how I am now. But I was so miserable and negative that she had a serious conversation with me and was like, "Aaron, you're draining the life out of me." And I had yeah, I felt bad in the moment, but then I just went back to what I was doing. But looking back on that moment, I definitely was draining her, not only her, but literally everybody around me, everybody I worked with, everybody I was friends with. So they definitely appreciate this transition. And not only that, she's so appreciative. I have the best wife. Okay. Hopefully she listens to this. And I say this in every podcast or everything I go on, but she's so supportive. Every project that I put out there that I put together, she helps me with everything. We are a team.
Yeah, but that's beautiful. You need a team. You need a
Yeah.
partner. This real idea of what it's like in life to have a partner in all things. And it's hard for people to understand if you are doing something that is extraordinary. The people that surround you also have to be extraordinary. You cannot do it with mediocrity. And that's not to put anyone down, but the mindset that you have to be in to be able to make substantial, like legitimate change in your life, to have influences and people that are willing to go through the shit with you. So tell me a little bit about her. She sounds like a badass. So like how did you meet your wife? How did that all happen? You guys have been together a long time, yeah?
Yeah, we've been together since I was in the police academy, which is 2006, and I met her through a friend that worked. I used to before I was a cop, I was a bouncer. So I was a bouncer at this bar. The girl who was the shot girl there, she brought her friend to. It was a Halloween party. I was dressed like a gigantic yellow chicken, and I met her, and we were cool, whatever, exchanged numbers. She invited me to her birthday, which I didn't go to, and then we just hit it off. We just started talking. We started hanging out together, and I just never looked back. And she's the best. She's a nurse too, so she gets everything that
Mm.
I talk about and that we talk about. She deals a lot of the same things at her job and in her work culture, so she's the best, mom of 2 kids, and she's my ride or die for real.
I love hearing people talk about their spouses because, a girlfriend of mine and her husband have this a brilliant podcast called Behind the Scene, and I was fortunate. My husband and I got to go on it, and my husband never does interviews, so we got to go on it, and people got to see the other side, the partner, how important it is to have the strong partner and the communication within that relationship, and the difference it makes in family longevity. Right?
Mm.
You come from a hate this word because it's such a terrible one, but you come from a broken a bunny ears thing for people who are listening, a broken home, one that has the sadness wrapped around divorce and that's been plagued by those things. So for you holding a marriage together, I mean, that must have been at the utmost importance, knowing what you went through as a child.
Oh, absolutely, and I put value in that relationship, and I learned everything not to do from my parents,
Mm,
and I think when people talk about relationships, they don't really realize when they're getting into a relationship that it's a partnership and that like sometimes you're going to have to lose, sometimes you're going to win. It's a compromise. Like not everybody is going to get their way 100% of the time, and it's like any relationship. And there's compromise all the time, and I think people get involved because societal pressures and whatever else. They want to be in a relationship, they want to be married, they want to push along this, keeping up with the Joneses thing,
mm.
instead of like being with somebody who they can get along with and negotiate with and actually value and have those compromises with, as opposed to somebody that they could just see themselves like being in a long-term relationship with. It takes a lot.
So if you were to tell the listeners what you would have looked for in a partner that would have been able to give you the success and tools to actually grow in life the way you want, what would you say like the top 3 things you would look for?
Open communication, somebody who lets you talk, and somebody who is not afraid to talk to you about something, anything that's going on is definitely number one. um Number two is I guess acceptance, like they love you for who you are, even with your faults and all that stuff is big. And number three, let's see, number three is, oh, I don't know. Now I'm like nervous because I can't come up with an answer. But
That's okay. So what like what about love? I mean, like there has to
oh yeah, of
be
course, love. I mean, that
like
goes without that goes without question.
that's
That's
what I'm
number one
saying.
then. Okay.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like that
Yeah,
real,
yeah,
like
yeah,
I'll
yeah,
go to the
yeah.
ends of the earth. I would like stand in front of a bullet for you. I think there has to be a
That's such a number
deep
one. I didn't even mention it, but yeah, like
It's okay, man. I
Yeah,
put you on the spot. I don't give you
yeah.
questions before. It's all good. Look, I mean, I think that's great. You talk about your wife in the book. You talk about her willingness to support you on this journey. So let's get into the nitty gritty. You know, you have this partner. She's a badass. She's a positive influence. I mean, she obviously hasn't had a lot of trauma put on her yet. Give it time. But let's. What was first? What did you do? What was the moment? What was the first of like, yep, I'm putting the chips down. This is it. This is what I'm doing next.
I had a nightmare, uh, essentially right after right while all this stuff was going on, and the nightmare that I had was I died at work. I got overcome by a perp. Perp threw me off a building. For those of you who are
Oh,
listening, us here in New York, we call criminals perps. Okay, I don't know how
love
it is
that
everywhere else.
so much.
So I got thrown off of a building, and I had to envision her, like growing up without me. So the
Oh,
very next day, I decided, what am I going to do physically that I enjoy doing? Because I really didn't know anything about exercise at all or nutrition, nothing. And so I decided I'm going to go. I liked riding my bike with my brother. That was like a bonding activity that we had when we were going through what we were going through. So I said, you know what? I'm going to start riding a bike. I went out. Actually, I Googled first, am I too fat to ride a bike? And
oh my
I swear, and people were like, yes, you are too fat to ride a bike. I joined this message board. It was like a bike riding message board, and people were like, yes, you're too fat to ride a bike. So I'm like, oh no. Right. But I went out anyway and I bought a new bike, and I was decided that I was going to ride from my house to the train station into the city, to go to work. And my very first day, I got a flat tire because I was too heavy for the bike.
oh man.
And I was gonna quit that day. Like, it was so embarrassing. I had to call my wife to come pick me up from the train station, and I woke my bike, but I fixed it. And then from then on, I was riding my bike almost every single day to and from work. And then I transitioned slowly. I had to walk through a gym. It's the worst gym you could ever possibly think of. Almost every command in the city has a gym that is essentially put together by the members and the people who work there. The department doesn't pay for it, and it's like old rusted equipment. It's like literally the bathroom from upstairs was leaking down on it. But I had to walk through it every day, and every day I would think to myself, "Hey, you know what? Maybe I should start lifting weights. Maybe I should do something." And then I did, and that's exactly what I did.
And you just every day you just started cranking on it.
That's it.
That's it. Fuck, I love that because like you literally had a moment. You were tested, right? You were tested in that moment when the fucking bike gave out the first chance it could. You were tested. You could have said, "No, it's not for me. I'm not doing it. I'm not getting up. It's a sign. The flat tire. It's just not for me." Just kept going.
You have to keep going, otherwise nothing will ever change. Things will always be hard, and I've learned that throughout my journey, throughout my life. Is you know everything that's happened to me in my life, the abuse, the trauma, my job, all this stuff, all the hard stuff. There was a time when I was a kid that I would beg for an easy life, but you know, I am so glad that I didn't have one. And it taught me to be a more resilient and stronger person.
You know, it's really funny. The people I talk to, people who have had childhood trauma, some type of either assault or verbally, sexually abuse, you name it, whether it's the church, the parents, the uncles, whatever it is, the world threw at that tiny human.
And brought to you by Mindful Meds. You guys have been seeing me take Mindful Meds for a little while now. Mindful Meds is a premium supplement company dedicated to supplying humans with the tools to improve their mental health, clarity, and performance, all while supporting their growth along the way. Whether it's the Immunity Blend, Lion's Mane, Inspire, or Voyage, all of their products are clean, tested, consistent, and they've become a huge help in my life. I found Mindful Meds over a year ago now, and I've never looked back. Go check out their website, mindfulmeds.io, and use the code BRASS at checkout.
People that come out of that, the ones that can come out of it, really makes a human the most resilient human I've ever seen. It is one of those things that you never wish on a child. But if that kid can handle it and take it and run with it as a fuel to stoke the flames, that person comes out 10 times stronger than most people I've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, there are people I'm not going to name drop them,
Mhm.
because, but there are people who are very important people who I am friends with who, when I talk about my trauma and things like that, they'll reach out to me and they'll talk to me about it. They don't talk about it publicly, but
Mm,
they'll talk about it. And like knowing that about them, that characteristic, like it makes all the sense in the world to me why they are and why they are as successful as they are, because there is
mm,
no way that people can deal with some of the pressures that exist in the world if you haven't gone through anything hard. And if you haven't gone through anything hard, you see it every day on social media. If you haven't gone through anything hard or you're not going through anything difficult, you will make everything else in your life completely difficult. Like that is your war, that is your struggle. And it's just so it's terrible. It's so terrible, and that's why everything is just so angry all the time, so triggered all the time, so
yep,
mad about literally nothing.
nothing. Because that's what happens, right? It's that old saying, soft time, hard times, da 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 da. I don't need to repeat it. It's that saying. Like if you give somebody a cushy life, you give people the warmth and the comfort and the love that they deserve, and like everyone deserves that. It
Mhm.
makes a different type of human. And what we do really well in Western culture is we make problems out of nothing,
Yeah.
Aaron. Literally, like it is blows my mind what people complain about. And that brings me to my next point with you. So, the book that you wrote was really interesting because charts and graphs and recipes, and you gave photos of what you were doing back then and what you were like now. But you were brutally, brutally honest. I mean, I read this thing back to front and then back again. And I got to tell you, some of the things you talk about in there I've never heard, Goggins talks about his struggle being overweight. You get other individuals in our community that talk about those things. But one of the things that stood out, and this may sound silly, had this to not like list. And I love the shit out of this. And let me tell you why. Because you were not to be vulnerable about things that you actually love. And you don't have to pretend to be this other person to appease others or to make others feel like you're a tough, hard dude, this New York City cop. So let's talk about Taylor Swift, The Bachelors, and Crocs.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Bro, what's the deal with Taylor Swift? I need
You know,
to know.
I love Taylor Swift. I love her music. I Me and my daughter, we bond over her music. Same thing. Olivia Rodrigo's another one. We bond over her music. Like we chill, we rock out. Like, and I just started like kind of like running. Not really. I'm not like a good runner. I'm like very big, but um, I'll put on Taylor Swift and I'll just jam out. It's like the perfect music for me to run to. I don't know what it is about it because it's just almost relaxing and like her music is very deep. I listen to Taylor Swift in the sauna, like Midnight's Lavender. No, Lavender Haze, that whole album. Like you go in the sauna and you just listen to that while you're in this. Oh my god, it's amazing. And listen, I love it. I love corny stuff. And so many people are embarrassed to admit that they like things and they'll like it behind closed doors. It's like those scenes you always see in the movie. It'll be like two guys sitting in the front seat and they'll be like, "You could turn this off," and be like, "I'm not going to turn it off. You turn it off." And then they start singing it together, and that's the
Yeah.
reality of it. We like this stuff, but we're just so afraid what other people will think, and other people feel the same way. Oh, screw other people. Like it's so important to embrace what you love and support what you love. That's why I made a hoodie and I make hoodies and stuff. It says
Okay.
Taylor's version on it, right? Because I lean into everything that I like so much that like I'm going to throw it in your face. Like I'm not embarrassed, and nobody should be embarrassed by what they like. We lose our identities and who we truly are in our
Mm.
careers and other things that we go on in our life. That we live these quiet lives of desperation and happiness when we have things that make us happy that we just forget about and we throw them in the garbage because we're so scared of what other people will think about us.
How did you get through that? There's got to be a way, a tool that you processed it where you're like, I'm not going to care about what other people fucking think, because you talk about that. I wrote this down here. That was one of the things that you said. Advice, fuck them.
Yeah, that's the best piece of advice. Uh, and I'm going to tell you
And
this. Maybe it's from going through my trauma and everything else. I have this this is actually a bad thing that I do is I just assume that nobody likes me. Uh, and yeah, I know that sounds crazy to people when I talk to them about it. And I'm like, I just assume nobody likes me. And they're like, why do you do that? I'm like, because you know what? If they don't, I don't fucking care. And if they do, it's a bonus. Right.
Mhm,
And that's it. And then that makes me not afraid to be who I am.
mhm.
I have my wife, I have my kids. I don't need to be loved and admired by anybody else. And I think that we get so caught in our social circles that we want people to feel a certain way about us. But at the end of the day, I just came to the conclusion that if nobody's willing to accept me for who I am, I don't really need to be their friend, and I feel that same way about everybody else.
I heard this really great saying, and it was like, "Your opinion of me is none of my business."
Yeah, that's true. That sounds like one of those stoic quotes that I'm gonna have to write down.
Yeah, it's a goodie. I know. I don't even remember
Mhm,
where I heard it, but it was like,
mhm,
"Your opinion of me is none of my fucking business." Just
mhm,
as much as it is for anybody else. Like, you can't care. I love this. You can't care about what other people think, or it will literally crush you. But also, here's the thing. There's this idea of there's 8 billion people in the world. You can be loved, you can be hated, but to be liked means you have no morals, no backbone, no real true thought about anything, because you just float from one side to the other side trying to fit in to this group. There's 8 billion people. You're not
mhm.
supposed to be loved by everyone.
Yep. No, you're right. Um,
Just wild.
I'd rather be hated I mean, there's that quote, right? I'd rather be loved for hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not, right? And
Mm.
I love that quote because there's so many fake people out there. It's so crazy, especially when you get in the environment when you actually start doing something and creating something like yourself, or like writing a book, or starting this podcast. The more you do, the more you put yourself out there, the more people out there are not going to like you. And I feed off of it. I love it now.
I'm just laughing because, dude, I resonate with that, and I resonate with you so much. Like, as you're talking, my eyes are like bulging out of my head because what happens in those moments is that they don't hate you. They hate what you represent.
Mm,
And what you represent is the part of them that never did the thing that they wanted to do, never had the balls to do, that couldn't show up and try. They ego is irritated by the light that you shine because you represent what they will never ever achieve.
you're 100% right, because they're too scared of what other people will think about them if they did it.
Okay, that brings me to my next thing with you. You surround yourself with good people, but you said something in your book. I think it was around on page 39, and you were talking about the algorithm knows who you really are. So, talk to me about social media because you use your platform in a really important way. But as you state in the book, what you post affects everyone. So,
Mhm.
make what you post be something fucking positive. Bring me into the social media, bring me into how you started it, what your first post was like, where you're these moments where you're like, walk me through the beginning to the where you're at now. I want to know all of it.
I People think that I'm like this social media like genius. I'm not. I started this social media page because I just wanted to start a social media page about accountability, and my wife was like, "Hey, listen, it would be great. You could possibly help other people." So my page originally started as accountability. It was like, oh, what I was eating and things like that, and then it just evolved into something that I never ever thought that it would evolve into, and I've just been building on it ever since. And I get shit all the time. I'll be on vacation and I'll post like a photo or some video or something, and they'll be like, "Dude, why don't you just enjoy vacation or whatever?" First of all, number one, I enjoy doing this. I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I enjoy helping people. That's number one. And number two, I'm not somebody who puts like hours of production value into things I create. It's literally I have a thought. I pull out the phone, I take a photo, and I write a cat. It takes me 5 minutes, and people think that it takes all day. It doesn't. My brother-in-law, who he's not in law enforcement or anything, he didn't even know that I had a social media account or a following or anything. Like that's how normal of a life like I like we live. People have this opinion that like, oh, these social media people are like always doing things for the gram. It's like, no, man, like I live my life, and the phone just happens to be in my pocket, and I just have feelings that I want to share.
Your posts are deep, man. You're like what my buddy says, you're deeper than a cookie sheet. And I love the shit out of that, right? Because You don't just be like, "This is me at the gym, look at my glutes." Like, you're
Yeah.
posting stuff of thought and feeling and reflection, and you're giving yourself moments of reflection, and that in my feeling, and I don't know how you feel about it, but in my feeling, it's like when I sit down and I write something and I put it out there, it feels good because it's off my chest, the thought is there, and it's like it would be a shame to have gone through all of these things in our lives and overcome monumental traumas and just what the world can throw at you. And then to just sit there and hold it for yourself. And I think that's fine. Don't get me wrong. But it's like you said, and like your wife said, it's like, this could help someone. So, like, why wouldn't you just pop it on a fucking social media platform and see what happens?
Mhm. You know what the best feeling is? Having no secrets
Mm,
to me, because I don't have to worry about what anybody finds out about me. I don't have to worry about anything. All my secrets are out there for the public to see. Everything's out there for the public to see. So I could just, I'm free to be myself and just live my life, embrace it. It helps me embrace just being who I am all the time.
that's a beautiful thing, though, because you're teaching your children to embrace all that it means to be a human being in this world.
Hmm.
That's a gorgeous thing. I love that. I don't think that's done enough. And I think we have people that do things for social media for sure. There's a type, but then you see the really organic growth, like just non curated, just really like, this is just my life. I just happen to be living, and there would happen to be a camera nearby.
Hmm.
I think your children will see that over time as dad not only helped himself, but dad was able to help a lot of people because he wasn't afraid. Dad was vulnerable. He was able to go past that word fear because everything we want in this life is right behind that word. Everything. I think it's I think it's brilliant, man. Talk to me a little bit about how you deal with peer pressure and groupthink.
I definitely have. It's so funny. Me and my wife talk about this all the time. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law are trying to adopt a child, and an older child.
Mm,
So like I don't know, 7, 8 years old, whatever it is, and they come with these sheets of like what their personalities are like. And we were reading one with them, and it said this child has oppositional defiance disorder. And my wife
mm.
looks at me and she's like, "You definitely have that." And I'm like, "Yeah, I 100% do." And it's weird to be involved, especially in a police department, when you have oppositional defiance disorder, when you are an authority figure. But I start to feel weird, like whenever I see everybody feeling the same way about something. It always causes me to step back and be like, "Wait a second. Everybody feels the same way about this. What the hell is going on here?" And I get
Mm,
skeptical, and then I try to, if I especially, and Joe Rogan talks about this all the time, if I really, really want it to be true, I have to take a step back and think about, like, do I want this to be true, or is it actually true, or is it actually real? I hate groupthink. And George Carlin says it best. He's like, as individuals, I love individuals. I see the light in their eyes and they're brilliant. But sometimes when people get together, they become real asshole groups of people, and they say things that they don't mean, or they just take up a cause. It's that whole tribalism
mhm.
aspect.
Yeah, we're seeing it right now a lot in the world. Um, I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about this. And I'll only go into this a little bit because this is not, we don't need to make this about that. But what I find really fascinating is people's willingness to go to the streets and promote war. So
Mhm.
I really struggle with that. And I think most people who've experienced war do, or who have experienced real violence. And I'm not talking about words
Yes.
hurt. I'm talking about, I'm going to punch you in the fucking head on repeat kind of violence. And so, being a New York City cop, being in gang units, some of the things you've had to experience, especially right now, living in that area where it seems like, oh, there's some nasty shit going on in the streets here, active, open protest supporting terrorism. I mean, how does somebody like you cope with that? Because I know you're a big believer in your energy matters and what you surround yourself matters, but like, How do you cope with that?
I First of all, the people who are involved in that, it's the same thing, tribalism. They're looking to be led. They're looking to believe in something, and they just get caught up in whatever it is that it is. And this just happens to be like protests for
Mhm.
war. And how do I deal with that? I just always keep my own perspective on everything, right? And I know, having experienced violence as not only a cop, but in my own personal life and trauma and all this stuff, I constantly think about all the time, like, most of the people who are affected by war are children, and they
Mhm.
have nothing to do with anything that goes on here. And I, I just constantly think about them and like what it could be that they're possibly going through and how this is all affecting them. And
Mhm.
and it's just sad, And then dealing with that, like that's just how I personally stay grounded and think about that. And I spread that message to other people too. Is like, you've been to war. I have not. But war is not great. And I think that a lot of people who celebrate war or the idea of war have never seen it. And I think that they romanticize it in their head as this battle of good and evil, right? Us versus them. And we do get caught up with this in a lot in the police department. We turn every like people who are not cops into criminals all the time. It's this whole dynamic of us versus them mentality. And it makes it almost something that they want to happen because they don't look at them as people. And I try to help
Mhm.
people just think that, listen, these people are people just like you. They just think differently than you do. And like, it's just important to reflect on that.
So when you're reflecting on that and you're working within other police departments and you're helping people guide their lives and things, what are tools that you give them to help them see the less us and them, more empathy, more compassion?
I try to I give the perspective of my own life, right? I was an abused kid. Like I became a cop. I had bad interactions with the cops when I grew up. I was coached as an abused kid to lie to child protective services, to the police, to all these people. So I understand what it's like to grow up in that environment. And I try to just impart on them that like, I am one of those people that, and so are you, when you aren't a cop anymore, somebody pulls over your wife or somebody like stops your kid or your kid gets into some kind of incident, some type of scuffle or whatever it is, would you want you showing up how you act showing up there? And I say that straight to
Mhm.
them. And it causes them to pause and reflect and be like, man, like, maybe you are a little right. Some people are just so swept up in the us versus them and like this whole mentality that they don't fully understand or grasp it. And I also tell them that perspective, you have to change your perspective a lot. When Because we get so caught up, we think that everybody knows what we know as cops, right? We think that I saw this a lot, especially on social media, people fighting with their friends during protests or whatever, and they get mad at
Mhm.
their family members and end their relationships that they've had for decades. We can't expect everybody to understand what we understand or see what we see or go through what we go through. They have their own struggles, but they don't know the perspective that we have. And I think active communication on both sides between both parties is something that doesn't happen enough, and social media gets in the way of that a lot. But these dialogues need to happen because we're all the same. We really are essentially all the same. Like, don't get me wrong, there are some people out there who are evil as fuck. All right, but that's most people are not like that. Most people are good people, and we all want the same things out of life.
It's funny that you bring that up and the way you said that. I had that thought last night. I woke up in the middle of the night and I just kept thinking, one of the things I say when I talk to individuals is I don't say people, I say humans. I use the word humans a lot. I think it's good to remind people that they're human beings and that when you remove the brain and the skin, we are literally no fucking different than anybody else.
Mm.
But for some reason, life or the people around us have given this complex that we're more important or less than for whatever the reason, whatever the circumstance. But if we could get others to realize what it means to be a human being, go back to the basics of being a human being, before the manipulation, before the brainwashing, before the world gets to us. And to be able to look almost through like a childlike attitude, their eyes, their innocence, even as we get older, if we could hold that innocence, that little bit of how we perceive the world, I believe we could get people to look outside of themselves and have perspective. But I just don't know how you do that when you have these conversations with police officers. This is something I was talking about yesterday. We were discussing firefighters, police officers, paramedics, and military. And when you hear these things happen in protests, and you hear these people, war, violence, war. They don't know what they're asking. But here's the other thing we forget is yes, we sign up for the job for sure. We willingly walk in. No one's making us do it. But we have no fucking clue what we're getting ourselves into, and nobody can say that they do. And what we ask of people to do, and then once they're hurt and we go, well, you signed up for it, it was the job you did. Talk about that enough. We don't talk about what the back end of these jobs look like, the fallout. So, how do we get people to start seeing that in a compassionate, empathetic way so that when things go wrong and the world goes sideways, we can give them perspective?
Talking about other people, like people that aren't
Mm,
in those professions,
mhm,
you have to maintain that open dialogue before an incident happens, right? And the
mm,
problem that exists a lot of times is most people out there don't know a cop. They don't know a fireman. They don't know somebody who's in the military. And that's why, and cops give these units shit all the time, these community relations units, but they're so important to actually putting a face behind what really goes on. And listen, a lot of this humanizing the bad shit is just so cringeworthy. I absolutely hate it, but
mhm.
some of it is very good. And people need to have, like, it communicates this idea of, you know, these people are people too. And yeah, you really just have to talk to people. And I don't know why us as first responders and military are just so afraid to just share conversations and words with people and like try to explain it to them from our perspective without it turning into a debate or a fight or anything. Emotions
Well,
just get too high.
I think that's what it comes down to. It's emotional irregularity, and it comes
Yes.
to emotional intelligence. And a lot of
Mm.
times after there is an incident, there's a trauma, there's a communication breakdown, there is that, fight or flight kick in as soon as something triggers someone. So they're not thinking clearly, the frontal lobe shuts down and they're not able to process even what they're saying
Mm.
from a calm state. Um, but I want to talk a little bit about your goal setting because I think when people listen to this episode, there's so much to learn, whether it's from your book or listening to you speak. But you did this really great goal setting on page 64, and there was the prompts you give. And I would love if you could give people a little taste of that, of how they can start the goal setting process to get themselves moving forward.
Let me just open up to page 64 here. Hold on. I have the book here.
No,
Hold
take
on.
your time, man. Take all of the time.
Okay. Goal setting, right? So here I have, what goal would you like to accomplish in the next year? And you have to keep that goal realistic. And then the barrier stopping me from meeting this goal, which is very important because people take a goal. Let's say I want to lose 50 pounds in the next year, right? Okay. It's a doable goal depending on, size and whatever else. What is stopping you currently from meeting this goal? And this is just not physically. Most of this time it's mentally. Like, what are you thinking? Like, what is stopping your brain from meeting this goal? And you have to write that down and actually deal with that and understand your failures. If you write a goal for yourself, no matter what it is, long term, short term, if you don't understand that, it's usually people have the same goals repetitively. And the reason that they're failing at them, there's a reason. And if you don't admit that reason to yourself and deal with that reason, you are not going to succeed at that goal this time or next time or ever. And then really take that first step, right? Can you do to accomplish that goal right now? People, and I laugh at this all the time. I call certain people chronic over planners and never executors. So what
Mm.
what can I do right now? Oh, I can go on the internet and research this and research this and research this. And then it's 6 months later, you never took one step in the right direction. You have to take that first initial step, and you're going to suck at it. You're going to be terrible at it, and it may not work. But you just learned something about yourself in the process that's going to help you take that second step. So you just have to take that step and take that lead.
Love that, man. I love it. It's real simple. Like it's about just starting, right? That's like the biggest thing when I talk to people. It's like you just have to start. Yes, you got to know a little bit of the research. You got to know what you're getting into to the best of your ability, but you got to start.
Hmm. People just they freeze and they don't know where to start. And the truth is, like, nobody does. Nobody knows where to start, and there's no best plan. There's no best practice. And
Yeah.
you start, you mess up, you learn something, you just keep on moving on. You keep on learning things, and you keep on accomplishing more stuff.
There's one other thing I wanted to discuss with you because you were a shift worker, and I think so many of my listeners are, shift work type humans. I want to talk about how you got your shift work sorted out, whether it was your food, your fitness, your sleep regimen. But give me some advice on that for those listening.
Sure. For the record, I still am an active sergeant.
Correct.
Oh, okay. All right. So I am a shift worker. I'm going to work right after this, actually. But so how did I get my shift work in order? I worked almost midnights my whole entire career, like the overnight shift. And this is the advice that I give to people: is if you're trying to start a workout plan, you have to make it most accessible to you realistically. Go before work. I don't care what shift it is you work. Maybe because especially in first responder professions, what happens is we're like, "Oh, we'll go after work." What happens at work every single day? You get stuck on something, you're gonna be stuck there forever, and then what happens? You didn't go, and now you already are breaking yourself out of this positive habit. But if you do what you wanna do for yourself first, not only is it out of the way, you'll feel good about it for the rest of the day. Hey, even if this day goes sideways, even if the rest of this day completely sucks and is miserable, at least I got out of the way what I wanted to do first. The next thing is as far as planning for your meals, you gotta eat when you are awake. People have this opinion like, "Oh, I work midnights. I can't eat on the midnight. My body gains more weight or whatever." No, if your body is awake, you need to feed it. All right, and your circadian rhythm will actually be better having done that. And sleeping during the day, I would. It depended on the day, but if I had something to do with my wife or kids first, I would do that first and then go to sleep, or I would sleep and then get up and do what I had to do before I went. And I would always make sure when I could to have at least one meal with my family every single day, whether it be the breakfast or the dinner or whatever before I left the door to try and do that. I know I work here in New York City. We do 8.5 hours for the most part. We don't do 10 and 12 hours. So 10 and 12 hour people, it's a little bit more difficult, but you do have more days off and you have to maximize those days. And then the other thing is, I talk about this a lot when I present, is families and your wife and your husband, they understand the shift work. They understand that what you signed up for the most part. What they don't get is that now that you're off, you're out hanging out with the same people that you were just working 40 hours of overtime with, going out to the bar drinking and doing all this other stuff with them when you could be at home, spending that quality time at home. And that's what causes most relationships to fail, because you're sending a clear message to them that they are not as much of a priority as your job and the people that you work with.
Mm, I love that. I think that's so important to illustrate because ultimately, yes, that may be where the comfort lies, but you made a commitment, you made a choice, you have a family, you need to show up for that family,
Mhm.
regardless of what's going on. And it comes down to communication. So, in saying that, Aaron, what's next for you? Because it seems like there is not a goddamn thing that could get in your way.
So, right now, today, actually, I am releasing three gratitude journals that I created.
What?
Yeah. Yes. So, I know it's so the first one is called The Journal for People Who Hate Journaling. And it essentially is like, hey, I don't journaling's all right. It's kind of lame. I don't know where to start. And I get that totally, especially from guys who are like, I'm not going to journal. Meanwhile, most of the successful people on earth have journaled, but it gets this bad reputation. So it's daily stuff that you go through. Some of it is fill in the blank stuff. Some of them are goofy questions. They're fun. It gets to some of them are little boxes that ask you to draw a dumb picture. Like it'd be like draw a bad picture of a birthday cake. Why? Because that little sketch of a birthday cake is going to elicit a memory in your head that you had of a
Mm,
yeah. So it's designed to do that. Then the second one is just called Grateful AF, which is just a basic gratitude journal. It's 2 pages of prompts per day, and then you read them back over the next day just to remind yourself of the things you're grateful for. Help yourself have a better day. And the third one, which I'm most excited about, is it's a gratitude journal for kids. So
Oh,
it,
yeah.
it's for ages 5 to 10. It's big format. It only goes through like a couple questions. Oh, who treated you well today? What made you feel good? What made you feel loved? Like this type of thing. And then the next page is it asks them to draw a picture of certain things. So the book is called My Happy Place. So the first one is like draw a picture of my happy place. And then it goes like the next will be like draw a picture of me with my family. So it makes them reflect on like good things that they have. Because especially like ages 5 to 10, us as adults, we get stuck into these devices so much. These kids do too. And like they don't even know what sitting through a commercial is like anymore, you know? Uh,
Oh,
yeah. So
man.
it just gives them the chance to reflect, and all of us, we could all use a little bit more gratitude in our life. And I think when we talk about when people promoting war and people promoting all this stuff and people just being negative all the time, is they really just are just ungrateful for the things that they do have and the perspective that they have.
They live in a place of lack and not abundance.
Yes.
Yeah, that's man, that's so brilliant. I'm so excited for that. I didn't know those were coming out. That is fantastic. Can you tell everyone where they can get those? I'm gonna jump off after we're done. I'm gonna grab a copy for my son because I know he will love the hell out of that.
Awesome. So they're on Amazon, and originally my book wasn't on Amazon, but that's also on Amazon now.
Amazing.
I put my book on Amazon. I put these 3 journals on Amazon, and then I also have a 62-day uh immersive course for beginners, like elder, like beginners and like really obese people, because I think that they are forgotten about in the fitness industry. Everybody thinks fitness industry, and they think like these CrossFit athletes and these bodybuilders, but most people who want to get involved in fitness just want to feel better, and they want to like feel better about themselves. So that course is going to be released like within the next like 2 weeks or so. It'll be finished, and so I can't wait for that. It's 9 weeks, and it'll be awesome. Hopefully, I'll change some lives out there who didn't think that they could be changed, and they could live a little bit longer and be a little bit happier too. So
I don't think you need to hope. I think you will, because you took the steps to do it yourself. And there is nothing more profound than learning from somebody who has walked through the fire themselves and come out the other side. Those are the only people I listen to. They're the only people I take advice from. I do not listen to anybody else if they have not been through it themselves. So I think you've got a high probability of changing a lot of lives because of that. So in saying that, I'm so sorry that you had to go through the trauma you did, but dear God, it made you the fucking man you are today. And I'm grateful for having you on the show and learning from you and for having you in my sphere of positive fucking influence. So, where can people follow you? How can they become big fans of the awesome Aaron and what you've achieved and what you are trying to do in this world?
thank you. At huge HUGE underscore fat FAT underscore loser. And for those of you who are like, that's so terrible, it's negative. It, I didn't expect my Instagram to blow up like how it has. I didn't. I'm really not that special. I'm not that important in my own mind. So it was just that I was losing a huge amount of fat. That's all it means. Okay. And I listen. I love myself a lot. I have a good relationship with myself. Instagram, TikTok, sometimes Twitter. I hate Twitter. It's so negative. I just avoid it. I post and ghost. And that's it.
Yeah,
But
so you know.
Instagram is my main go-to. If anybody out there wants to reach out to me, send me a message. I answer every single DM, every single message that I get. It's important because I know what it's like to reach out to a stranger and ask them a question. So I answer every single person. So if you have any questions, childhood trauma, fitness, nutrition, whatever it is, I will get back to you and I will answer those questions for you.
You're a fantastic communicator, man. I can't thank you enough for being on this episode. You stick with me. Everyone else, we'll see y'all next week.